It happened on a Tuesday morning, one of those ordinary days where breakfast smells fill the kitchen and the coffee machine hums like a background lullaby. Evelyn, or Evie as everyone once fondly called her, had just finished folding the laundry and was placing fresh towels in the hallway closet when the silence shattered. Before we dive in, I'd love to know, where are you tuning in from? And if you haven't already, make sure to hit that subscribe button. Trisha's voice came first, sharp, furious, slicing through the morning stillness like broken glass. Did you really say that on the phone yesterday? To Aunt Marla? That Martin's been doing side work while on disability? Evelyn blinked, confused. I didn't mean... You did say it, Simone chimed in, arms crossed, tone dripping with disdain. Nice job blowing up his whole claim. Do you realize what you've done? Before Evelyn could respond, something hit her ankle, a slipper, tossed by her 9-year-old granddaughter, Kayla. Why would you want Dad to get in trouble? The child snapped, eyes already shaped by blame. And Martin, her son, her quiet boy who once refused to sleep without her, humming, stood by the fridge, arms folded, mouth tight. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't defend her. He just said, flatly, "This was careless, Mom. Really careless." That was the sentence that cut the deepest. Not the accusations, not the slipper, not even Trisha's venomous stare, but Martin's cold neutrality, his refusal to believe the best in her, his choice of silence over support. Evelyn opened her mouth to explain. She had, indeed, spoken with Aunt Marla the day before. But it had been casual, a passing remark, nothing with malice, no intention to harm. Just a mother proud of how her son was keeping busy, fixing up neighbors' fences, helping with yard work, keeping his hands occupied and his spirit lifted. She had no idea it could jeopardize his benefits. But none of that mattered. The verdict had been delivered. By noon, Evelyn had packed 2 suitcases. She didn't slam doors. She didn't argue. She didn't cry, not yet. She folded her sweater carefully, zipped up her worn leather handbag, and walked past the living room where no one looked up. Not a single person asked where she would go. Outside, the sky was the color of dull metal, and the wind bit through her coat. Her joints ached, but she stood tall. Evelyn had nowhere in mind, no plan. Just the bitter clarity that she was no longer welcome in the home she helped sustain, in the family she had quietly carried for decades. She didn't leave in anger. She left because something inside her had broken, something more permanent than trust. Sometimes, when no one listens, the only dignified answer left is to walk away. Evelyn had lived in that house for nearly 3 years, but there were no signs that it was ever her home. Her name was never on the mailbox. Her framed photos had been packed away in boxes and stored in the garage, just to make room, Simone had said lightly. Her belongings lived in bins, stacked neatly beside the washing machine, the same laundry room where she slept on a narrow daybed, sharing her nights with the scent of detergent and the low hum of pipes in the wall. She didn't complain. Complaining would make her a burden, and Evelyn had spent her life avoiding exactly that. So she folded towels with practiced care, made dinner before anyone asked, and swept up crumbs no one else seemed to notice. She'd learned to move quietly, to anticipate needs, to vanish from conversations before her presence made anyone uncomfortable. There was no lock on the laundry room door because it had no door at all. Just a curtain that Simone insisted was enough privacy, though her voice carried the implication that someone in Evelyn's position shouldn't expect more. Simone was everywhere. She floated through the kitchen with loud phone calls on speaker, left her shoes in every hallway, and had slowly transformed the shared living room into an extension of her own identity. Plush throws, designer candles, and her name on everything from the Wi-Fi password to the dinner reservations. Evelyn often felt like a ghost in someone else's house, haunting a space where she was not seen, only tolerated. There were moments Evelyn wondered if anyone remembered who she used to be. Not long ago, she had been a teacher, someone who commanded a room, who mentored generations of students, a woman who spoke at school assemblies, who led meetings with poise and earned respect. Now she hesitated before entering the living room, unsure if she was interrupting. Now she lived to avoid being in the way. One evening, Evelyn offered to pick up groceries and was met with a flippant, "That's okay. You've done enough, Mom. Just rest." But resting didn't feel like rest when it came with the unspoken suggestion that she no longer had value. It was during one of her long, silent mornings after clearing dishes without acknowledgement. After watching Simone and her daughter laugh together over brunch, she wasn't invited to that. Evelyn realized something painful. She hadn't just become invisible. She had allowed herself to disappear, one quiet compromise at a time. And no one had stopped her, because in that house, her history didn't matter. Her sacrifices didn't matter. The version of herself she used to be had been erased, gently but completely. It started as a routine call. Evelyn sat by the window, the early afternoon sun warming her back as she answered a friendly check-in from the clinic. The nurse on the other end asked a few simple questions about her medication, her sleep patterns, and then casual about the family's financial updates as part of a benefits reevaluation. Without thinking, Evelyn mentioned that Martin had been picking up some side work in the evenings, nothing major, just odd jobs here and there to help with groceries. A harmless comment, she thought. But in the next room, Simone was folding laundry, her ears sharp as ever. She paused, her hands tightening around a towel. A moment later, she walked into the kitchen, her voice laced with sugar and something else beneath it. "Mom," Simone said, tilting her head with a knowing smile. "You told the clinic about Martin's work, didn't you?" Evelyn blinked, caught off guard. "Yes, just a small thing. Why?" Simone's smile didn't quite reach her eyes. "You know what that could do, right? The government doesn't like double dipping. We could lose the benefits." Evelyn's heart sank. "But I didn't mean any harm. I thought being honest." "That's the problem, Mom. You don't think—" Simone cut in gently, her tone polished but edged. That night, Tricia found the official letter first. It had been slipped through the door a notice about a pending review of their eligibility. She read it twice, then stormed into the living room, paper clenched in her fist. "Who told them about Martin's work?" she snapped. Evelyn, startled, raised her hand timidly. "It was just a short call with the clinic. I didn't think." "Exactly," Tricia hissed. "You didn't think. Do you even realize what you've done? We could lose everything." From that moment on, the temperature in the house dropped. Whispers became stares. Every movement Evelyn made felt watched. The warmth that had once existed, the shared laughter in the kitchen, the evening TV shows vanished like mist in sunlight. Even Martin, who once asked her how her day was, now barely acknowledged her presence. Evelyn tried to explain, to mend what she didn't know she had broken. But no one listened. The silence around her was louder than any shouting could have been. And in that silence, something inside her began to shift. What had once been a home now felt like a courtroom in Evelyn, the unwitting defendant. Her words, once welcomed, had become a liability. Her presence, a weight. The same voice that had sung lullabies and told stories was now seen as reckless. She sat in her room that night, staring at the door that no one knocked on anymore. And for the first time, she wondered if perhaps silence was safer than honesty. It began like a celebration, but the smiles were too sharp, the laughter too rehearsed. Evelyn had been told they were having a small get-together to lift everyone's spirits after a difficult few weeks. She arrived in the living room with a tray of drinks, hoping to be part of whatever warmth might still exist in that house. But as she stepped in, she noticed the hush, the way the three women turned toward her with thin smiles that didn't reach their eyes. Tricia raised a glass. "To Evelyn," she said, voice dripping with sarcasm, "for keeping us all entertained." The others laughed. Simone pulled out a folded piece of paper and began to read in a dramatic tone, mimicking Evelyn's soft-spoken manner. "Dear Diary, today I tried to be helpful, but everyone was too busy to notice." More laughter. Evelyn stood frozen, the tray in her hands trembling slightly. She tried to smile, to play along, but then Kayla chimed in. "I think she believes she's part of the family," she sneered, "when really she's just a long-term guest, a parasite." That word hung in the air like a slap. Parasite. Martin was there too, standing by the wall, arms crossed, saying nothing. His silence echoed louder than any insult. He didn't defend her. He didn't look at her. He simply watched as his partner was humiliated in his presence. It wasn't just a joke. It was a performance crafted to push her out without having to say the words. They wanted her gone. And they wanted her to choose to leave so they wouldn't have to bear the guilt. Evelyn said nothing. She placed the tray gently on the coffee table, her hands steady now. She looked at each face in the room, not with anger, but with something deeper, quiet clarity. Then, without a single word, she turned and walked out. No one stopped her, no one followed. The door closed behind her like a final line drawn in the dust. Outside, the air was cold. But for the first time in weeks, Evelyn breathed freely. They had expected tears, a breakdown, a plea to stay. Instead, they got dignity. Some exits don't need announcements. Some goodbyes don't need to be spoken. And some punishments, like being left with your own cruel tear, the most lasting of all. The room Evelyn rented was small, tucked above an old nail salon with a faded sign and flickering neon lights. It wasn't listed anywhere online, and the landlady, a soft-spoken widow named Lan, accepted cash and no questions. It had no fancy address, no marble countertops, no matching dinnerware. But for the first time in years, Evelyn had something she hadn't felt in a long time: peace. She lived simply. Mornings began with a bowl of oatmeal and black coffee, eaten by the window that overlooked the alley behind the shop. She liked the stillness, the quiet hum of the salon downstairs, the early birds fluttering around the dumpsters. In the afternoons, she watched old game shows on a tiny secondhand TV, shouting out answers to questions no one else could hear. She wore the same soft cardigan each day and carried her canvas bag like armor when walking to the corner store. Her joints ached less. Her mind wandered more freely. There was no schedule to meet, no critiques about how she folded laundry or whether she salted the stew too heavily. No one asked where she was going or reminded her of what she owed. For once, she belonged to herself. But freedom didn't mean forgetting. Her heart tugged when she thought of Dylan, her grandson, the only one who never looked at her like a burden. He was kind in the quiet way of boys who watched more than they spoke. He used to sneak her cups of tea and sit beside her, just to be near. He was 11 the last time she saw him. She'd pressed a paperback book into his hands, Charlotte's Web, her favorite, and told him, "Words matter, darling. They build bridges. Remember that." She worried for him in this silence, not because she thought he'd turn out like the others, but because children often get caught in storms they didn't create. And the house she left behind? It had thunder in the walls. Still, Evelyn didn't reach out. Not yet. Her retreat wasn't an act of punishment, it was an act of survival, a gentle reclaiming of breath, of thought, of space, of dignity. And so each night, before turning out the light, she whispered a quiet prayer, not for reconciliation, but for strength, for Dylan, for herself. Not alone, just free. It had been nearly a month since Evelyn had walked away quietly, without dramatics, without confrontation. She hadn't changed her number. She simply stopped answering calls that weren't rooted in love. Then one rainy Thursday morning, the silence broke. Her voicemail lit up 6 new messages. The first was from Kayla, her daughter-in-law. Her voice trembled, words overlapping in frantic rushes. "Please, Evelyn. Dylan hasn't come home. We've called everywhere. He's not at school, not answering his phone. Please. I know you're upset, but if you know where he is, just tell us, please." The next was from Martin, a voice she hadn't heard in weeks, calm and clipped, but beneath it, fear. "Mom, I know things are complicated, but please, Dylan is missing. If he's with you, just say something, please." The others were variations of the same desperation. Kayla crying, Martin begging, confusion growing. Evelyn's hands shook, but not from fear. From something deeper, a sharp ache between sadness and fury. She didn't call them, not yet. Instead, she called Dylan's school. The receptionist recognized her name immediately. "Oh, Mrs. Jennings, we've been trying to reach the family but only got their voicemail." Dylan didn't show up yesterday, And the counselor mentioned something you should probably know. 10 minutes later, Evelyn sat frozen at her kitchen table. According to the school, Dylan had come to the counselor weeks ago. Quiet, withdrawn, but clear. He said he was being made to feel like a traitor at home for siding with his grandmother. The word stung. He had overheard Kayla call him that. In the living room, loud enough for him to hear from the hallway. He's too old to be playing the sympathy card, she'd said. If he wants to leave with her, let him. He's not a baby. Evelyn closed her eyes. The memory of Dylan's tight hugs, the quiet loyalty in his gaze now, twisted into exile. He hadn't just been hurt. He'd been discarded, emotionally disowned for showing love. No wonder he vanished. She didn't cry. Not yet. She just stood, took her keys, and walked to the door. She wasn't sure where he was, but she knew what she had to do now. It wasn't about rescuing a boy. It was about pulling back the curtain on a truth no one wanted to face. That silence, when twisted into punishment, could make even the kindest hearts disappear. And Evelyn had seen enough vanishing to last a lifetime. It was a gray morning when Evelyn received the message. A friend from the neighborhood had spotted Dylan alone, sitting on the steps of a duplex 2 blocks away, his backpack tucked beneath him like a makeshift pillow. Evelyn's heart clenched. She didn't rush. She gathered her scarf, locked the door gently behind her, and walked with quiet resolve. There he was, her grandson, smaller than she remembered, thinner, with dark circles under his eyes that no 13-year-old should carry. When Dylan saw her, he didn't jump up. He didn't run into her arms like in the old days. He just looked up, eyes glassy with fatigue and fear, and asked softly, "Can I come home, Grandma?" No dramatic apologies, no explanations, just the fragile plea of a child who finally understood where safety lived. Evelyn held out her hand. "Yes," she said. "Let's go." Back at the well house, she opened the door to her modest apartment. It wasn't large, just 2 rooms and a kitchen corner, but it was warm, safe. She gave Dylan clean towels, let him shower without questions, then made grilled cheese sandwiches the way he liked them, golden edges, not too much butter. That night, he fell asleep on the pull-out bed, clutching the blanket she had crocheted years ago. He didn't toss or turn. Evelyn sat beside him for a long while, watching the peace return to his face. That night, she made a decision. No more negotiations. No more visits supervised by people who saw Dylan as an obligation or a pawn. No more waiting for someone else's permission to protect what she knew in her bones was hers to protect. She met with a lawyer the next day, one of the women she had mentored through her building program now, a junior associate passionate about elder rights and child welfare. Together, they began preparing the case, a motion for permanent custody. Angela and Derek tried to object, of course. Accusations flew, but Evelyn didn't flinch. "You didn't lose him," she said at the first mediation. "You gave him up when you chose convenience over care." When the judge asked Dylan where he wanted to live, he answered without pause, "With Grandma." And that was that. The room didn't erupt. There was no applause, just a quiet verdict, and a grandmother's heart breaking and healing at once. Back home, Evelyn hung a small framed quote on the kitchen wall, a gift from one of the women in the building. "Sometimes, the person you rescue ends up rescuing you." She glanced at Dylan, who was setting the table with the careful attention of someone who had learned to appreciate small things. "Yes," she whispered, "sometimes they do." They showed up on a Tuesday afternoon. Trisha, in her polished heels and practiced smile, Martin, standing just behind, fidgeting with the sleeves of his shirt. Evelyn had seen them through the window before they even rang the bell. She didn't flinch. She didn't rush to tidy herself or make tea. She simply opened the door when it was time. "We'd like to talk," Trisha said, with the edge of entitlement still tucked beneath her carefully chosen words. "People are starting to ask questions. About Dylan. About what happened." Evelyn stepped aside, letting them in not because she felt she had to, but because she wanted to look them both in the eye. Martin cleared his throat, trying to adopt a tone of reason. "We're not here to argue. We just think maybe it's time we all sat down, figured things out together. Maybe brought Dylan back home where he belongs." Evelyn didn't sit. She stood tall, centered in her living room, as if the air itself bent gently around her. "Dylan is home," she said simply. Trisha blinked. "With you?" "Yes, and he will remain here." A pause. Then the excuses started. "We didn't mean it the way it sounded. It was a misunderstanding. We were under pressure. He's a child. He needs stability." Evelyn listened. Not impatiently, not coldly, just clearly. She had heard it all before. In other words, over the years, justifications dressed as apologies, concern wrapped in control. She held up a hand not to silence them, but to center the moment. "You don't get to rewrite what was said," she said gently. "You don't get to decide when it's convenient to act like family again. Dylan remembers everything. The way he was treated, the way I was dismissed. That day wasn't a slip of the tongue. It was a mirror, and we've all seen it clearly now." Martin shifted uncomfortably. Trisha looked away. "I'm not here to shame you," Evelyn continued, her voice soft but unmistakably steady. "But I won't hand him back to a house that only recognizes his worth when others are watching." Silence stretched between them. Not awkward, just real. "Tell people whatever you need to," Evelyn added. "But know this: my door stays open only to love that comes with respect. Anything less stays outside." And with that, she walked them to the door. No yelling, no scenes, just a line, quietly drawn and fiercely honored. It wasn't vengeance that led Evelyn through the heavy glass doors of the Legal Support Center. It was something deeper. The quiet resolve of a woman who had witnessed enough, who had seen the light in her grandson's eyes dim each time he flinched at a raised voice, who had watched joy become caution and caution become silence. She arrived not with anger, but with evidence. Printouts of text messages where Dylan was berated for asking simple questions. Audio recordings of cruel, belittling exchanges taken during brief visits. School records showing a sudden drop in performance. Letters from Dylan's teachers noting a change in behavior: withdrawn, anxious, unusually obedient. With the help of a pro bono attorney, Evelyn pieced together a timeline. She spoke carefully, without embellishment, letting the facts speak louder than emotion. The lawyer, experienced, composed, nodded with increasing gravity. "You've done the hard part already," she said. "You've seen it, and now you're choosing to act." The court proceedings were quiet, procedural, just a room with white walls and measured voices. But for Evelyn, it felt like standing on the edge of a cliff. What if the judge didn't believe her? What if Dylan had to go back? But justice, when it arrives with integrity, doesn't shout. It simply affirms what should have been obvious all along. Evelyn was granted temporary guardianship. Dylan came to her not with celebration, but a cautious glance. "Do I really live with you now?" he asked softly, like the question itself might be too hopeful. Evelyn knelt beside him. "Yes, sweetheart, and you're safe. Always." In the days that followed, their home slowly became a haven. Dylan began to laugh again, small bursts at first, like sunlight breaking through clouds. He asked questions, made jokes, and even started drawing again. Evelyn pinned each sketch to the kitchen wall like a silent declaration. "Here, you matter." There were still challenges. Trust doesn't rebuild overnight, but for the first time in a long time, Dylan slept through the night. And Evelyn? She slept lighter, but with peace. Because standing up hadn't just protected her grandson, it had restored something in her, too. They had entered a new chapter, one shaped not by fear, but by mutual respect, not by obligation, but by love. And this time, no one would take it from them. No angry confrontations, no dramatic finales, just silence, steady, unbroken, and powerful. No one from Evelyn's former household came looking anymore. The messages had stopped weeks ago. No more explanations, no more empty apologies, no more bargaining disguised as guilt. They had not been robbed of Dylan. They had forfeited him, not through a single act, but through 1,000 dismissals, each one chipping away at the trust that had once held them together. Evelyn didn't gloat. She didn't even feel satisfaction. What she felt was something quieter, heavier, and more profound. Closure. Each morning, the apartment filled with the soft sounds of a life reclaimed. Dylan would help set the breakfast table, his small hands clumsily placing forks and napkins, proud of his contribution. Evelyn, now steadier with each passing week, brewed tea with care, filling the kitchen with warmth. There were no shouting matches, no passive-aggressive silences, just the hum of a kettle, the scrape of chairs, the laughter of a child who no longer felt like an inconvenience. They lived slowly and deliberately. Afternoons were for reading together or sketching on the rooftop garden. Evelyn had started with help from a kind neighbor. Dylan's drawings, once cramped and anxious, now burst with color. Trains with smiling passengers, trees that reached the sky. A house with two figures standing side by side, holding hands labeled simply, home. Evelyn guided him gently, never pushing. They learned together math, spelling, even a little cooking. She taught him how to fold clothes, water the plants, say please and thank you, not because she expected perfection, but because she believed in dignity, even in the smallest acts. Their world was modest, but full. One evening, a social worker stopped by for a routine check. After observing Dylan's ease and Evelyn's quiet attentiveness, she said, almost in surprise, "This feels like a real home." Evelyn smiled softly. "It is." When someone later asked if she had ever considered revenge-taking legal action, demanding an apology, making sure they paid, Evelyn simply replied, "Revenge is a debt I don't carry. I just stopped paying interest on a relationship that was already bankrupt." Sometimes the greatest act of power is not to strike back, but to walk away, not to explain, but to live better, not to punish, but to protect what's still good like a child's heart, and your own. And in that apartment, filled with quiet routines and unexpected joy, Evelyn finally found what had long eluded her: peace.